life enthusiasts. That's what I call kids with ADHD. They're very enthusiastic. They keep you on your toes.
Are you overwhelmed by motherhood and barely keeping your head above water? Are you confused and frustrated by how all the other moms make it look so easy? You can't figure out how to manage the chaos in your mind, your home, or your family. I get you, mama. Parenting with ADHD is hard. Here is your permission slip to let go of the Pinterest-worthy visions of organization and structure fit for everyone else. Let's do life like our brains do life, creatively, lovingly, and with all our might. When we embrace who we are and how our brains work, we can figure out how to live our lives successfully and, in turn, lead our families well. At the end of the day, we just want to be good moms. But, spoiler alert, you are already a great mom. ADHD does not mean you're doomed to be a hot mess, mama. You can rewrite your story from shame spiral to success story. And I'll be right here beside you to cheer you on. Welcome to Motherhood in ADHD. Hey there, successful mama. It's your friend, Patricia Sung. Today, I want you to meet my friend, Tami Hackbarth. Tami and I met at a conference last year, and I just fell in love with her straight talk. She tells it like it is, and yet she is so kind, so wise, and genuinely wants for you to feel better about what you're doing and knowing that like you totally can make this happen. You can have success in the way that you want it and that truly anything is possible. Tami is a life and work coach. She is a speaker, author, podcaster, fair play facilitator. She's a fellow former teacher and a lifelong California. And she helps Gen X women get their time and energy back so that they can create the world that they want to live in. This was such a good conversation. Like, as soon as you hear Tami talking, you're gonna be like, "Oh, I know why Patricia likes her." We are constantly saying the same thing. It is so beautiful to find people in your life that get you, and also to have moms that are like a smidge ahead of you that you can lean on as a mentor. And I so appreciate Tami's wisdom in so many things that we have talked about over the last year that we've gotten to know each other. And today you get to peek in on a piece of that. So we talked about how do we be okay with self-care? Like, how do we not hold guilt to that? How do we start to create this pattern of thinking about ourselves? And weaving into that, the idea of fair play and how do we create a family system that makes sense for everyone? So I cannot wait for you to meet my friend Tami. So let's dive in. Let's welcome Tami to the show. How are you doing today, ma'am?
I am doing really well. I just came back from the gym because I have fairly recently discovered that really vigorous exercise is so good for getting my brain on track. I'm like, oh, I hate that. But it works. So I am feeling really good. This morning I was feeling a little antsy. And then now that I've hit the gym, I'm like, oh, I can focus and have a good afternoon. So I'm doing really well. What about you?
Actually, I'm having a pretty good day. I'm like, gotten a lot of stuff done. I had some good conversations today and I'm working on my retreat. Some lame, boring things like reading contracts, which are like, contracts. But when you know what it's for, why am I reading these long, terrible contracts? Then it makes it a lot easier. So I cannot wait to jump in. So I'm going to start back to the reverse about like a year-ish. Tell me about what prompted you to get diagnosed, ma'am, and the mini version of how that went. And we'll just go from there.
Okay. So it's funny. I'll start with the most recent thing. And that is I have a daughter that has ADHD and she very, very clearly had ADHD from early. I was like at her 2-year appointment, I was like, so can we talk about this? And the doctor was like, she's a little small. And I'm like, I know, but she's very fancy already. So can we, move this down the road here? And she said, oh, we'll definitely be having conversations over the year. And I was like, terrific. So in other words, she presented quote, like a boy, very, very impulsive, all the things. And I was like, rock on. I see what we're working with here. I used to be an elementary elementary school teacher, which meant that I got to hang out with lots of tiny coworkers that I used to call life enthusiasts. That's what I call kids with ADHD. They're very enthusiastic. They keep you on your toes. They're moving and they're grooving. And you're like, please do not poke your neighbor. Okay, let me help you with this paper tracking system. So I had a weird amount of knowledge about how to help kids that have ADHD, because when you're a teacher, you're like, oh, look, I have 2 handfuls of them. This is terrific. One year I had 14 boys in my class and 6 girls. And I swear almost every boy had ADHD. So that year we started our day with running. I was like, we're having running club. And they're like, shut up. This is amazing. I was like, I know. And then I was like, do you know why we do that? And they're like, why? I'm like, because you need to screw your lids on a little bit tighter before we come in the room and try to dive into the thing I'm here to do, which is to teach you stuff. So let's do some exercise first. So long story long, as my daughter got older, things that were very familiar to me started happening. Like she was out during the pandemic and she didn't go back to school. She left mid 3rd grade, spent all of 4th grade at home and all the way till after Thanksgiving break of 5th grade. And when she got back in 5th grade, she started avoiding peers during recess. She started being the helper of the teacher. She started hanging out in the library. She started talking about reading under the stairs. And every day she would tell me something and I would think to myself, I used to do that. I used to do that. And after like the 100th time of me going, I used to do that, I was like, wait a second. It's like, tell me more about this. She's like, it's just overwhelming. I feel like there's too much drama. I can't keep up. I don't know what to say to these people. I was like, oh my God, what's happening here? And I just started doing, I had gone through the whole process with her where you see all that, like the Vanderbilt and the this and the that. And you're like, oh yeah, all of that. Me too. And I thought, but do I really? So I called my primary and I said, hey, can I get on the evaluation list? She's like, here's the number. I went over, got the number. And then it took me almost a year to actually get through all the hoops because I missed an appointment because my phone was on Do Not Disturb. I missed an appointment because I was waiting next to the phone, but missed the appointment, but I couldn't do anything else that day. And every time I talked to a practitioner, I would be like, oh, I missed the appointment because of this. They couldn't stop laughing. And I was like, do you hear this all day? And they're like, yes. So yeah. And then I had in that whole other process of getting through the evaluation, they're like, you've got a lot of trauma in your background. Are you sure it's not that? I'm like, well, I have been to every single kind of therapy there is in the entire universe. So I have dealt with my ACEs. Thank you. They're like, but you have sleep apnea. And I'm like, that's true. And I cannot sleep with that machine. And they're like, well, sorry, we can't do anything for you until you get your sleep apnea treated. And I was like, all right, somebody just threw down some gauntlet of they're daring me not to do this. So now I've been successfully sleeping with a CPAP for almost a year. And I was like, you give me another hurdle and I'm going to do it. Again, long story long, I just got my diagnosis in January at age 53. I started taking medication. When I finally met with a psychiatrist, because there's it would seem 400 steps to get to the psychiatrist who's going to do the final evaluation and go, yes, here's medication. I did the classic. He's like, tell me about yourself. And I talked nonstop for 20 minutes. And he asked one clarifying question. Then he asked me about self-care. And as you can see here, I have a giant blow up poster of my book cover that is called The Essential Guide to 100% Guilt-Free Self-Care. And he looks over my shoulder and he's like, you literally wrote the book on it. I'm like, I did. I did. And he's like, man, it seems like you've got so many skills. He's like, you have pieced this together. You have written a book, started a business, raised a kid, changed careers successfully 3 times, all these things. And I'm like, And he's like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen when you get medication. I was like, I know. I am also curious about that. And I have to say, I thought, oh my God, is everyone's brain so quiet?
Yeah.
Why can I nap now? Why can I finish unpleasant tasks? Dang it.
Yeah, it's crazy, huh?
Yeah. And he was so kind, Patricia. He was like, I think you've suffered enough. He's like, you've been living with this for more than 50 years. And I was like, I remember one time after my daughter started taking medication and everything that used to be so hard for her got easier. And I remember looking at her and saying, oh, honey, I didn't realize you had been trying your hardest at literally every single thing in the world. And she was like, I have been trying to tell you that my whole life. And I was like, girl, I get it now.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm so glad that there is a tool because it's not just medication, right? There's the skills part, there's the working with coaches, there's all of that. But there's that one little piece of the puzzle that you're like, oh, that is a really helpful tool. I love having the right tool for the job.
What would you say that you do differently now that you know that you for sure have ADHD?
I beat myself up a lot less.
Ooh, hand clap.
A lot less. And what's crazy is I have had a very, very active self-compassion practice for, at least a decade, like a very conscious practice, a meditation practice, all of those. And yet still, I was like, I always had in my mind, why are you so behind? Why don't you have that figured out yet? This is my favorite. Everybody else can do it. Why can't you finish it? Why can't you do it? Why can't you follow through? And it turns out it's really, really hard to focus when you have 500 tabs open all the time.
And like, if you were to say, like, with medicine, how many tabs do you think you have open now?
I have 500 open and I can focus on the 5 that I need. Because, when my medicine wears off, I'm still going to need that breadcrumb trail back to what I was supposed to be doing. Yeah. But I can focus on the smaller details within the bigger picture. Like my word of the year this year is fulfill. And with the idea of like, I would like to complete something. I'd like to have that sense of accomplishment of you ticked all the boxes all the way till the 100%. You didn't get to 76 and go, I'm done. And so I'm able to attend to this. Now, the first few months on medication, I was like, ooh, I am going to be queen of the universe forever. This is the best thing that's ever happened. As apparently the honeymoon of medication has gone on, I'm like, oh, look, there's still things I don't want to do. There's still things I don't really see. There's still things that I'm like, oh, that's a work in progress. But the judgment of my ability to be an adult has gone way down.
That is beautiful.
And it's a relief. And I'm less irritable and my frustration tolerance has gone way up. I didn't realize how tired I was before. Like so many things have been made easier.
Yeah. Whenever people are like, oh, I've been diagnosed with chronic fatigue, I'm like, let's ponder that for a moment. I'm not saying you're not tired. I'm asking, why are you so tired?
How many tabs do you have open? And how many pieces of your attention have gone into each of the tabs today?
Yeah. Because when you're dividing your attention amongst 500, there's not a lot to go around.
Right. Well, and the other thing that really, really, again, should have been a clue early on, when I was a teacher, I had a really, really hard time doing like thematic planning, like the big picture planning. I was like, how do you guys do that? Like, how do you envision these things? And I would sit there and like take copious notes. And I was like, well, this is not my forte. But let me tell you, you get me in a classroom with a point that needs to be made. I was like, you better watch this performance, children.
Buckle up.
Because things are happening. This is top tier performance here. I'm going to have to go next door to find out what we're doing later. But right now in this moment, you are learning the hell out of math right now. Those multiplication facts, they will be in your brain because I have 42 different ways. Oh, you don't like it that way? Try it this way. You don't like it that way? Try this way. So again, when I started, pulling back in my own experience and looking where my daughter struggled, I was like, oh, I struggle with that too. So what have I done? I really dug into, hey, can I borrow your brain, person? Because I don't see things the way that you do. For instance, taking care of a house, being an adult homeowner, there's certain things that are really obvious, but then there's all of the things that aren't. And you're like, oh, you mean laundry isn't just one step? When somebody says, go do laundry, it's like, well, we're going to need to fill in the blanks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man. I'm like, my brain is like firing 52 things at once. And I'm like, rein it in, Patricia. You can only talk about one at a time. I have to ask first, when you say that your goal this year is to have the fulfilled project, do you know what that is?
Do I know what the project is?
Yeah, you said like you wanted something to completion for this word of fulfilled. Do you know what that is?
Yes, I do. Because
are you allowed to tell me?
Well, and okay. Do you listen to the Gretchen Rubin podcast called Happier?
I have, yes.
Okay,
not recently, but I have.
Okay, so one of her and her sisters exercises they do with their listeners is to create a list of things that they want to do. So in my 24 things that I want to do in 2024, some of them are really small, like whiten your teeth. Check, already did it. Some of them are bigger, like rewrite the copy on your website. Like it's that granular stuff, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I do have plans. So I really struggle with writing copy and all that for my website. And I'm working on a rebrand because I have been in business for 7 years. And I'm like, I need to take a closer look at this. Yeah. So you know what? I'm going to work with my good friend Calvina to do a brand in a week. Her course is called Brand in a Week. I'm like, I am here for it. She's like, show up at 9:00. This is the assignment. Get me your assignment by 5:00 tonight. Tomorrow we'll discuss. And I'm like, girl, that's the kind of accountability that I need for unpleasant tasks. Right. And so I have made peace with, I don't care what I need to do to get something done, whether it is hiring somebody to body double, whether it is to hire a coach to be like, no, let's dig into this deeper, to work on delegation, to teach my child how to do it. It does not matter to me. But yes, I have so many things that I'm like, oh, I'm like 75% of the way there. Can I just finish that thing?
Because I look at like, you already have this book behind you.
I do.
You clearly can finish projects.
You know how I finished that book? This is the best story. When I just said to my mastermind, I was working with a local group of gals here in Sacramento, California. And I said, I want to write a book. And they said, that is terrific. And one of the people said, remember that time that you helped me with my 1-room challenge? I said, I do. And she said, you have to have some sort of event so that you'll finish. So I threw a birthday party for my book and I pre-sold the book before the party. And so I had to finish the book because people had already purchased the book.
Ta-da. That is an A+ ADHD Ta-da. Strategy.
And then the best part is I wasn't even done by the party, but it didn't matter because they'd already pre-ordered. We got together. We did a bunch of stuff. I had the blow up. I had the cover. I had this. I fed them. I had a little like bunch of my artist friends and service provider friends come. And so somebody's like, oh my God, it's like Sacramento's Instagram came to life. Everybody got to meet each other. It was at my friend's interior design studio. So it was really beautiful. And then I got to hand deliver the books. It was actually really touching. It was like, oh my God, look at all these people who now have my words in their hands. And it was because I threw that book a birthday party.
Okay, so how are you okay with being the person who's like, I don't care what I have to do, I'm going to get it done. And like letting go of that, like, and I'm putting words in your mouth of like, whatever it is, the shame, the guilt, like, oh, I should be able to do this, but you know, fill in the blank way. Like, how are you okay being the person who's like, I don't care what it takes, I'm going to make it happen. Even if I look, fill in the blank negative thing that we have now imagined in our heads.
Self-acceptance. I'm in my mid-50s. And so I've got a lot of decades that are like, you know what, girl, you did not finish that before by yourself. So why don't you go ahead and ask for some help so it can just be done? And I don't have to prove myself anymore. I'm like, everybody needs help. Everyone needs help with something, right? And so I need help finishing. I do not need help starting anything. Task initiation, not my problem. Not. I'll initiate tasks for you. I love starting things so much, right? And so I just know that when I want to get good at something, I hire help. When I don't know how to do something, for the longest time, I thought I had to know everything and I thought I had to like appear a certain way. And now I'm like, you know what? Smart people ask questions and smart people get help because they do. No one does anything well alone, in my opinion.
Okay. I want to ask one more ADHD question, and then I want to get into why we're here in the first place. Is that, you know, as someone who is in their 50s, what would you say to another person who is in the, I'm like, I always say that people need to have like fancy names for old people. I'm like, I'm happy to be old. I am glad I made it this far. I don't like need to mince words about it. Like, I'm not dead yet, and that's a good thing. I worked hard to get here. Okay, so if you made it this far.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, is it really worth it? Like, why should I bother getting a diagnosis when I'm in my 50s or 60s? Like, what's the point? What would you tell them?
Honestly, to be able to have confirmation that you're not deficient. that your brain works a different way than other people's, because so many people from very young ages. So I am a full-on Gen Xer, and so many of my report cards, like my official documents, say not living up to her potential. I remember being 8 years old and being like, girl, teacher, how do you know what my potential is?
How do I live
That's
up to
crazy.
potential?
What? That is insane, right? And so we get all these messages about you're a hot mess. No, I have different priorities. You never finish anything. It's like, well, I do start the hell out of a lot of interesting things. Oh, you're a flake. No, I have limited short-term memory. You're this, you're that. It's like, well, actually, what I am is a very cool weirdo. You're welcome. So, as you said, we're not dead yet. Guess what? I will just say recently, one of my clients who's a little bit older than me said, oh my God, I think the next 10 years of my life might be the best ones I've ever had. I was like, shut up, me too. Because of this self-acceptance practice. Every bit of self-knowledge that I have, I'm like, oh, that explains. Oh, okay. Okay, I see what you're doing there. It's this idea of working with yourself rather than against yourself. I think it's totally worth it.
Okay. Now, on this idea of self-acceptance, does that have anything to do with your love of 100% guilt-free self-care?
Yes, it does. Because one of my stories that I told myself my whole life, and the call came from inside the house and outside the house, let's be real, was I'm too sensitive.
Yep.
I'm too reactive. So I should have a t-shirt that says I'm too much. I'm too much. And then all the other people would be like, oh my God, where did you get that t-shirt? Because I want to get mine bedazzled. I am also too much. So
is there a glow in the dark version?
Right? So if I'm too much, I learned very early I needed to meet my own needs so that I could excel at life. I'm a super introvert. I'm a highly sensitive person with a trauma-filled background. And I'm like, yep. And I'm super smart and I'm super driven and I'm super funny. And you could do a lot worse. So I need to take exquisite care of me, because that shit is an inside job. Because right now, some people might be thinking, guilt-free self-care, what is that even? So when I'm talking about guilt-free self-care, I'm talking about the things that we do on purpose so that we don't want to run away from ourselves in our lives. So I take care of my physical body. I do tons of shit, unsexy shit, for my mental health. I work on my relationships. I work on my sense of greater purpose in life. I push myself out of my comfort zone. I set boundaries. Like, I do the ugly stuff that is so not Instagrammable that I'm like, I don't even know what to post on Instagram. Hey, you guys, I went on another walk today, just like I did the day before. Hey, y'all, flossed my teeth. Hey, y'all. Like, it's not sexy. Oh, I took some alone time and I hid from my family in my dirty car today so I could have some isolation, some solitude, so I could get it back together so I wasn't yelling at my family because I was overstimulated. 100% guilt-free self-care is this idea that it's the foundation of your entire life. And when you have all the pillars of your self-care on absolute lock, it kind of doesn't matter what the rest of the world is doing, because you're like, girl, someone's got you, and that person is you. And then the other thing that it relates to is I have a young daughter, and I don't want her to grow up to be a doormat. I don't want her to grow up thinking that she needs to light herself on fire so that she can take care of everybody else. So if I want my daughter to do something, I have to do it, because kids are terrible at listening to our words and amazing at doing what we do. So I always say to my clients, hey, if you would not let your young child or your teenager, whatever, trade places with you in your life as your life stands right now, and everybody has looked at me in absolute horror up to this point, I'm like, right? So if you don't want your kid to trade places with you, give them a different model, show them what's possible. And they're like, dang, okay.
Yeah, that one's always a gut wrencher. You're like, oh.
But when you do it, you're like, dang, this is great. Why are more people not doing this? Because we all, as you said, we're not dead yet, but we also really do only have one life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to quote Mary Oliver here, but I could.
I'm like, can I quote the youngins? YOLO.
Yeah, exactly. It's this idea that we take care of what matters and we matter.
Yeah. Because when I think about that, I'm like, ooh, I feel like I'm mostly there. I'm not 100% there. There's different parts where I'm like, oh, I don't want my kids to get that right. But if I look back to like where, 2018 Patricia was, I'm like, all right, we made some progress. This is some good stuff. But it very quickly highlights what it is. And I'm like, ooh, this is where I need to zero in. This is where I would not just plonk my kids in and be like, here, you take over, tag in.
Right. And so that's a great question for your listeners right now is just take a look at any aspect of your life. Would you want your most beloved person? Let's be real, because, we love our spouses, but we're really there for the kids who are like, hey, would you take them as you are now and trade places with them? Like, I'm sure you'd be like, oh my God, I'm such a great mom. And yes, I would love to be a child when I'm the mom. That would be terrific because that would be very different than I was raised. But would you want your kid to be you? Would you want your kid to put everybody else first? Would you want your kid to not take care of their mental health or their physical health? And also, just another thing, when we don't take care of ourselves, our needs don't go away. They get squished down. And you know what happens when you squish things down? They poke out the side. They come up at inopportune times, right? Because we're all giant toddlers when it comes down to it, when our needs aren't met. They come out eventually, usually at inopportune times and in an unattractive way.
Yeah.
Everybody's really reflecting on that moment. They're like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep. So like, let that one sit for a second.
Yeah.
Let it air out. So like along that line, what can you do to treat your ADHD? Medicines are a great way to help so many people, but they don't work for everyone. And sometimes you're in a place or a season that they're just not going to work out right now. Maybe they're not an option. I have put together a list of a ton of ideas, most of which I either have done or I'm currently doing myself to take care of my ADHD. This is like the full brainstorm list of what you can do to take care of yourself beyond medication. Head on over to patriciasung.com/beyond-meds and grab yourself that checklist. That's patriciasung.com/BEYOND-MEDS for a free checklist of all the ways that you can take care of yourself beyond medication. Given that most of the people listening right now are probably moms, how is it that we as moms can be okay with taking care of ourselves? We already talked about the self-acceptance and how it squishes out, but like, what are some practical things that we can do, like somewhere between 1 and 3, that we could actually do to like take care of ourselves and not feel bad about it?
Okay, I want to start with everybody picture a 3-legged stool, okay? And imagine this is my family. One of the stool legs is my husband. One of the stool legs is my daughter. And one of the stool legs is me. What happens if, we'll call it the papa leg gets taken care of and the kiddo leg gets taken care of, but the mama leg has termites and water damage and just general neglect? We think it's not affecting anyone else, but it is. It is. Because again, your needs don't go away. They just don't. Your family's like, they might not know what it is, but they're like, somebody might need a nap. Somebody might need a meal. Somebody might need a night away. Somebody might need somebody else to do the laundry and pick up the kids and all of that. So how do we not feel guilty? I love this question because guilt is the idea that you're doing something bad. Shame is that you are bad. And I think they hold hands a lot because when you think that when you believe that you're doing something bad, you feel like a bad person. But you are a human being that comes with instructions. And you're like, oh my God, but everybody's always like, oh, they sent the baby home without the instruction manual. No, there's some basics here, friends. And they are, everybody has to sleep. Everybody has to move their body. Everybody has to eat. Like, your human needs don't go away when you become a parent or a partner or a professional. Do we swim in a culture that says women should be selfless? Yes. Do we live in a culture where women own a super majority of the household tasks? Yes. Can we change that? Also, yes. So my number one recommendation for people who want to make a change is to connect with other people who want to make that same change. So if you want to be somebody who exercises, I hate the word exercise, because back in 2016, I interviewed 100 women and asked them about self-care. And when I asked them, where are you struggling in self-care? 100% people, 100% said, I don't exercise enough. And I was like, well, exercise, you make everyone feel terrible, right? So if you want to be somebody who moves your body, not to change the shape of your body, not to create your bikini ready body because you already have one, put a bikini on your body. If you want to do that to increase your mental health because your doctor said, you need to move this body because you need to complete your stress cycle, find anyone to take a walk with. It could be your dog. It could be your neighbor's dog. It could be your neighbor. It doesn't have to be your best friend. It doesn't have to be your spouse. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't even have to change your clothes. You just need somebody. Put your shoes on, say, I'll meet you on the corner in 15 minutes. Here's a trick. If you want to walk a mile-ish, say, I'm going to walk out 20, and then you have to turn around and come back. But don't say I'm going for a 40-minute walk because that sounds like a lot. Say, I'm going out for 20, and you go for 20, you come back, and likely you've walked pretty close to a mile, right? We all need this. It's basic human maintenance. We're not terrible people for not taking care of ourselves, right? If we use a car analogy, would you not change the oil in your car? If you don't do that maintenance, it breaks down. If you don't do your maintenance, you break down. That is why my group coaching program is called deferred maintenance, because we all know what we need to do. We're just not doing it, right? So get some sort of accountability support person that's like, yeah, my doctor told me I have to walk for 20 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day too. And then you go. And you don't feel bad about it. You're like, at least somebody's happy. And that's called my doctor. At least one person's off my back about this. Check. Right? They say that it's like you become the 5 people that you hang out with most.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't go to a bar if you're trying to quit drinking. You don't hang out with the smokers if you're trying to quit smoking. Mm-hmm. If you want to create different habits, you just got to put it out there and be like, who else needs to take a walk? So maybe you're busy because you got 3 kids. They're all playing soccer. Great. You're at soccer practice. Instead of sitting in your chair, gossiping with the people next to you, just walk around the field because you can double dip, right? There's years and seasons where you're like, I am really, really busy. Yeah. Like, yeah. And your needs still don't go away, mom.
Yeah. And I think looking for those places, like I like to double dip, like where can you already work it into what you're already doing? Like you don't need to add more things to the list. You already do.
You likely need to take some things out.
Yes.
But until then, let's double dip.
Yeah.
Like maybe you call your best friend that you never have time to see, but you both go on a walk in your own neighborhood. Maybe you and your spouse need some connection time. Maybe you and your spouse, I know, I'm going to say it again, go on a walk. It's a great time to connect. Be outside with the people that you love.
Mm-hmm. I think getting away from that idea that it's like, I have to schedule this in my day and I must do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 times a week. And I have to go for 45 minutes and I have to. It's like when you put all these rules on it, then it makes it really hard.
Absolutely. And every single thing that you do, the tiniest little step in the direction that you're going is worth celebrating because it's cumulative. I started this round of my career as a yoga teacher. And when people say, oh, I really wish I could practice yoga, I'm like, well, maybe in the season of your life, you're not going to go a 90-minute class, but maybe you could do one pose at your house. And people are like, that doesn't count. Says who? Actually, it does count. Learn how to count.
Did you do yoga? It's a yes or no question.
Yeah. It's like, yes, I did some. Terrific. When you can, maybe do more, or maybe do something else. Every win is a win. Throw yourself a parade when you take the walk that your doctor's prescribed to you, right? Maybe your yoga pose is when you get home from the softball field and everybody goes in the house and you find yourself for a brief moment in the car by yourself. Nobody's figured out you haven't followed them into the house yet. And instead of getting on Instagram and doom scrolling about how everybody's life is better than yours because you're not getting anything done, you sit there with your eyes closed until somebody comes and knocks on the window, which we know will not be very long. But that pause can make you go, wow, we've been moving 1,000 miles an hour. My brain is moving 1,000 miles an hour. Oh, a pause? I do have time for a pause. I do have time for a walk. I do have time to connect with people. One of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about is how can I help people realize that everything is possible? And you're like, well, I can't become an astronaut. I'm like, well, maybe you can, maybe you can't. But with that attitude, you cannot. But can we open the possibility that you could, I don't know, go to space camp? You could read a book about Sally Ride. You could go to the science museum. You could get on the path of the thing that you want. And also, maybe you're halfway down that path and you're like, this sucks. Let me try something else. Hi, because we have a lot of interest over here. That's okay too. What's not okay is being like, oh, everything sucks and I'm powerless to do anything. We have agency. We can make decisions.
I want to go back to what you said. Every win is a win. Why do so many of us, especially women with ADHD, discount that those wins are not wins?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but ADHDers love perfectionism. They love
We
black
do.
and white thinking.
It's our favorite.
It's actually a special talent, right? If I did not become an astronaut, then all the books I read on space were for naught.
Nothing.
Nothing. It's all, I'm a loser. Because I don't know this technicality. I know that everyone has a negativity bias, right? And you're like, what is a negativity bias? It's when you have a review at work and your boss gives you glowing things that they're just like, we couldn't do this without you. You're such a great asset in this way, blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, but you're late. And the only thing you focus on is that you're late. That's your negativity bias, right? Your negativity bias keeps you alive. You, as a modern person, not that different than our ancestors, right? So we had to look out for saber-toothed tigers. That's why we notice when things are amiss. It's so we don't get eaten. So one of the things that I do, again, with my clients, I do this with my family, I do this with everyone, and everyone's like, that is so dumb, but it works, is I'm like, can we notice 5 things that are going well right now? Let's start with, I'm not getting eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Whew, that's terrific, right? My house is not on fire. In fact, it's a beautiful day today. Because when we train our brain to notice something other than the deficit, it changes everything, because then you start going, what else is possible when I look for things that are possible? When I look for the solution, when I look for the celebration, when I look for the first step. One story that I love, that I think, I'm not a weight loss person, I'm a very weight neutral person, but this story really stuck with me because I read this in a magazine at some point. This man had lost something like 185 pounds or something. And everybody was like, oh my God, how did you do that? And he got all zen on them. And he said, I didn't lose 185 pounds. I lost 1 pound over and over and over again. I was like, ooh, that was a sick burn, sir. You just took everybody's excuse for not trying things away from them. If I cannot be an astronaut, I can't take steps towards me learning about space. No, those things are not mutually exclusive, right? So taking small steps in some direction gets you out of paralysis. Mm-hmm. Have I been terrible at this before? Of course I have. You know what really helped? Self-compassion, self-acceptance, knowing that likely when I'm trying something new, I am in fact going to be terrible about it because I've never done it before. Mm-hmm. But that Ira Glass, it's a very long quote about people who create art, whatever, media. They have a vision in their head of how they want things to go. Mm-hmm. And then they make their first step towards what they ultimately want. And it sucks. And most people give up. And his point is, it's going to take 5 years between when you start and when it matches the vision in your head. And it will never match the vision in your head if you stop before the 5 years. So if you need a little pick me up right now, you can say, I need to suck at something for 5 years before it gets better. It takes the pressure off. You're like, I'm supposed to be terrible at this. I'm learning. This is uncomfortable because I'm not good at it. Guess I better keep going because apparently I have 5 years of not being great before I get there. Okay, Yeah. It's a process.
Yeah, it's a process.
Everything's a process.
Okay. I do have one question from my community. Katie asks, how do I remind myself about me when I'm focused on everyone else? And I don't realize that I haven't gone to the bathroom in 4 hours.
I love this question because I used to be a teacher. So I have this weird thing with bells. Every time a bell happens, I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to be picking up my class? Am I supposed to be eating lunch? Am I supposed to be going potty? Am I supposed to be walking people out? That is a great question. And I would say begin a tiny awareness practice. And it goes like this: set an alarm in your phone that simply asks the question, what do I need right now more than anything else in the world? Every hour, you ask yourself, what do I need more than anything else in the world? And pause, ask yourself the question, maybe even out loud, using the word you, because what do I need? What do you need more than anything else in the world right now? As if you're your own friend. And then check in, and you might be saying, I need to go potty. Turns out I haven't been in the last hour, or I'm really thirsty, or I have a headache now, or I need to close my eyes for a few minutes, or I'm glad you asked. I think I'm good right now. Just finished a meal. I remember to take my medicine. I move my body. But in the next hour, our needs change, right? Because the best self-care is responsive self-care, which is constantly asking yourself, what do I need right now? Because what you need when you have a toddler and it's 100 degrees out and your air conditioner is broken, probably really different than what you need when it's really cold and you have a teenager, right? So if we get in the habit of asking ourselves, quieting ourselves enough to go, okay, that's a real question. What do I need? And then giving ourselves what we need, we do start to build that, oh, I do matter. And I would say just as important as I matter, what I do matters. Because when I change my actions, my life changes.
Okay, so when we think about all of these actions, one of the things we hadn't talked about yet is that you are a certified fair play coach, which I guess first, if you give us a 1-minute synopsis of what fair play is, but then how can we as people with ADHD use this philosophy or methodology to make our lives better? And I know this is a big topic and I'm like, we don't have a ton of time. I could not wrap up the interview without bringing this up because this is something that just is so important to moms as a whole, but also when you have ADHD. So go.
Okay. All right. So Fair Play, a book written by Eve Rodsky, published in 2019, has turned into a method that has cards. Essentially, how I like to talk about Fair Play, it's a game. Who doesn't love games? It's a game that helps families redistribute the domestic labor that it takes to run a household. The idea, so there's 100 cards. I call them adulting tasks. And the idea is that you look at the 100 cards and you're like, please don't make me do 100 things. You go through and you're like, let's get rid of these because they're not relevant to our lives. If you do not have children, you already got rid of 40 cards. Lucky you, right? So we start with getting rid of the cards. And then the reason I love Fair Play for neurodivergent families is that thing I was talking about, like the invisible infrastructure of lesson planning when I was a teacher. I didn't get it because I couldn't see it. I couldn't see the pieces. Mm-hmm. And Fair Play is all about, let's use laundry, for instance. We talked about laundry. If you say to, your neurodivergent 15-year-old, go do the laundry, you might get a completely blank stare because they're like, what is laundry? Does it happen somewhere? Like, how do clothes I wear turn into that thing? What's with all the machines and all the things, right? So in Fair Play, you have 3 distinct pieces. So if I was going to sit down with my family and we were going to fair play it up for laundry, we would first talk about how do clothes turn from clothes to laundry. We would talk about the stories that we had around. We would want to bring the humanity of laundry. I might tell a story. This is a true thing. Schools sometimes install washing machines on site because a lot of people live without laundry facilities and kids are embarrassed to go to school in stinky clothes. So laundry can be really heartbreaking for some people, right? Mm-hmm. My story with laundry is I used to be afraid to take the dirty clothes down to the basement because I was afraid of the basement. Patricia, I spent my entire childhood hiding the dirty clothes in the bathtub, in the one bathroom in my house. I would collect all the dirty clothes. My job was to take them downstairs and I would hide the clothes in the bathtub. When I told my daughter that, she almost peed herself. She was like, that is the funniest story I've ever heard. And I was like, and they never said anything. I don't know who then took the clothes down, but it was like the magic fairy taking the clothes all the way down. She was like, I can't imagine grandma, grandpa not saying anything. I was like, but they didn't. I thought it was weird, right? Then my husband tells his story. Then we talk about who did the laundry growing up. My husband's like, I grew up with a single mom. Of course, my mom did the laundry. I'm like, I eventually did the laundry for my family after I got not being so afraid, right? So we've got this like, why is laundry important to our families? This idea that we're going to live in our values, we're going to teach our kids how to be grown-ups is like really fundamental. My entire life, I was like, I think I miss the adulting day. Who's got the handbook? And I feel like Fair Play really does that for me. I'm like, oh, turns out there's 100 things. Let's try to get rid of some of them, right? So we have the conception. What is laundry? Why is it important? With the planning. And that's where we start going, okay, we need laundry detergent. We need a stain fighter. We need whatever. You need your supplies. You need to teach everybody in the house how the machine works. You need to say, on what day will the laundry be done? Who's going to be the person who takes the clothes and puts them in the washer, does all the blah, 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 and puts them in the dryer? Is laundry done when it's in the dryer? Or is laundry done when it's folded and put back in drawers? Right? So we talk it through. So we're not constantly looking at everyone in our house going, Mom, I don't have any clean clothes. Mom, I'm not ready for my softball game because you didn't wash my uniform. Mom, where are my socks? Because we know who's holding the card, right? Then we have the execution, which is actually we do laundry on Tuesday. We know the laundry is done when Billy has collected everybody's laundry basket from the laundry room and put it on their bed. That's how we know laundry is done in our house. And so it makes invisible, intangible things visible and tangible. And it's that thing where you're like, oh my God, is this just good teaching? The answer is yes. And I know you spent a lot of time in the classroom. And what do? We created these scaffolds for our students because they're like, you can talk all you want about the math algorithm. I don't see it. So unless you do a step by step by step by step, I'm lost, right?
Yeah.
And we work together so nobody feels shame about not knowing how to do the thing that they've never done before. And we're not fighting with each other over the laundry. As a family, it's like we're superheroes with our elbows linked and we're against the laundry. We are conquering the laundry instead of the laundry coming between us. So that's Fair Play in a nutshell. It's a communication tool. You can gamify it. It makes the unsexy tasks of adulting really visible. The other thing I love about Fair Play, self-care built into it. It is a given for both adults, and I would say the children as well. Another thing that's built in is adult friendship. So you work as a team to make sure your most beloved people get what they need and they do the same for you. And then there's whole other unicorn space, which is like, what? It's amazing. It's free time to do the things that make you you. It's for you to hyper fixate on space because you saw that Sally Ride movie that one time. And your family is like, we got you. We're going to take care of everything at home while you go out and be your most awesome self. And then Tuesday night, when it's my turn, I'll go out and do my awesome thing while you stay home because we've had all the talks about what's expected. Everybody's claiming ownership to like, we're on the same team and we've made our values really visible. We've made our processes really visible. And I have found it to be so helpful. And I think it's because I come from a teaching background where I'm like, you know what? It turns out nobody knows how to do a jumping jack until you teach them. Nobody knows how to tie their shoe. Nobody knows how to do kind of anything that as adults, we just take for granted.
Because like to use your jumping jack analogy, I mean, especially like having taught young kids, I mean, some of them are jumping and like their hands are together, but then the feet are not like, it's like all of a sudden they're just like hopping around waving. Like
they're waving. They're like, they can't, some children cannot put their little hands together over their head unless they're looking at their hands.
Yeah.
And that's one step. Don't ask them what they're doing with their feet. So if you've ever, hung out with a 7-year-old and you go, can you do a jumping jack? 99% of them will do some sort of arm flailing, leg flailing thing. You will delight in this and you'll go, oh, wow, somebody at some point taught me how to do this, because clearly that's not a factory installed situation with a kid. Neither is algebra. Neither is your bed.
Or like knowing like what, like the thing that's not going to do, like, do you know what done looks like? Because like in your analogy of the laundry's done when Billy puts the folded basket on so-and-so's bed and all the baskets have been delivered is a very different conversation in your family than if you're expecting that all the clothes are already in your drawer. Or when you don't have the clear, this is what done looks like, which is an issue with ADHD. Everyone's mad because their version of done was not executed or was executed and the other person disagrees.
Right? If I asked everybody right now, where do your clothes live? Some people would be like, clearly they're on the wardrobe. Duh, isn't that where everybody keeps their clothes? A lot of people would answer, especially neurotypical people. They would say they're folded in my drawers. Duh. At our house, my neurotypical husband, he folds his clothes and he puts them away. I have baskets inside giant drawers where I dump things. They're categorized. Every once in a while, I'll get a wild hair like, oh, I want to have Marie Kondo. Like I get weirdly fixated on folding t-shirts the right way and filing them. And then eventually really oh my God, it's so great. And then I eventually pile things on them. I can't find anything. And then I take it all out and do it again. Right. And recently, my 13-year-old said, I need you guys to stop yelling at me about my clothes. And I said, okay, what's the solution? What does your clothes being put away look like? And she said, this giant sack thing, that's where my dirty clothes go. Terrific. I love that your underwear are not going to be on the floor anymore. Where do your clean clothes go? She said they go in this laundry basket. You know what? Fine. Okay. She doesn't open a drawer. There's no baskets. It's one laundry basket. It sits on top of something. There's like a mound. And I thought, but now we all know clean clothes for her are here. Dirty clothes for her are here. We're having the conversation. And I love working with families on this because how many times have we been told, especially as little kids, go in your room and clean it? I don't know about you, but when I was little, I was like, well, a clean room means nobody can see my stuff. So I would take everything and I would shove it under my bed. I would shove it in my drawers, close them, and I would think, I'm done. And then my neurotypical parent would come and pull all this stuff out from under my bed. I'm like, why does he keep doing that? He's real mad about that I'm not doing this right. Yeah. But it was clean before he pulled it all out. Mm-hmm. But he never got around to the teaching part of this is what I mean.
This is what they mean.
This is what this means. Right? And so I just feel like it's such a great tool. And it's also really flexible because I'm not saying, hey, Patricia, this is what laundry looks like. This is what laundry is important to me in this way. And because I have figured it out, you at your house have to do the system the way that we do it at our house because that's the right way. Right.
And I think that's why we really get in trouble and like downloading another Pinterest chore chart is that we're expecting somebody else to tell us what done is. And that might actually be what done works for your family.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone is going to make a Pinterest board of my teenagers' clean or dirty clothes situation. But I have to tell you, there's no more clothes shoved under her bed. There's no more clothes kind of hanging out all over the house. So we've decided as a family where we are on this thing in this season of our life, and we get along so much better. And also notice, I asked my child, what is important about this? How would you solve this problem? I don't agree with everything that she comes up with, but I do actually, she's got great ideas. She's also an idea machine. I'm like, again, going back to earlier in the conversation, I don't care how it's done.
Is it done?
It just needs to be done.
And like when you have those conversations, you also get to see like, okay, I'm okay with this, this, and this. But like when we go to say something special event, in that case, wrinkly clothes in the basket's not going to work for me. So in this fancy clothes, I need these ones in the closet. The rest can be in a giant lumpy pile. But you have that conversation so nobody's surprised when they walk out to fancy event and they look like they just rolled out from under the bed. You're all on the same page.
Exactly. And also, if you yourself are somebody that has ADHD, let's be real, most of our relatives also do too, right? And wouldn't it be nice to save the wrinkly clothes at the wedding shame spiral that we all went through as kids because we were shoving our clothes wherever? We can look ahead and be like, well, at some point, gonna need that thing to be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's this daily practice of communication, daily practice of deciding what is important, what's important at this time, and always having that idea of this family unit could be fighting with each other, but instead we're working together to solve the problems that are coming our way.
Okay, I know that we could talk for another 17 hours. So let me wrap us up. We're going to do the lightning round in just a second. But before we do, can you tell the mamas listening where they can find you and how they can work with you?
Yes, you can find me on my website at tamihackbarth.com. I do have a group coaching program called Deferred Maintenance, where we do all things self-care, and we get into unicorn space, we get into fair play, and we also get into family communication. Again, coming from a teaching background, I'm like, let me teach you the ways of the family meeting so that you can go forth and solve problems as a team instead of fighting with each other. I do spend some time online. The best place to find me is on Instagram. And I also have a podcast where our lovely host here will be a guest on the show. And you can find me 100% Guilt-Free Self-Care podcast wherever you get your shows. And my book is available online. You might even be able to find it at your library. And that is called The Essential Guide to 100% Guilt-Free Self-Care.
Awesome, Tami. Okay, I'm going to do the lightning round questions. And so for this part, you just fill in the blank. You don't have to explain anything. Just answer the question. All right. So number one, the best thing that I've read or listened to recently is?
I'm such an avid reader that I'm like, there's so many. Resistance Live. It is a YouTube show. Resistance Live.
Number two, my most boring about me fact is?
That's hilarious because I'm nothing about me is boring. I don't drink alcohol.
Okay. Number three, when I'm having a rough day, my go-to quote, song, poem, book, podcast, activity, whatever is?
Reading fiction, either curled up in bed or in a hot bath.
Number four, don't tell anyone I
used to be really good at drinking, and I stopped because I was curious what life would be like and what I would be like if I didn't drink anymore.
Number five, if I had a magic fairy wand for one spell, I would.
Oh my God. I'm really, really fighting this between doing all this like big political work and having a clean house. You know what? I'm going to take the clean house because then my mind would be free to focus on the world's problems.
Deal. Okay. And the very last one is number six. My best piece of advice for mamas with ADHD is?
Move your body.
Well, thank you. I am so glad that you're here, and I want to keep talking, but I also need to take my kids to tennis lessons. So
yeah, same.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I so appreciate it, and I appreciate your wisdom with us today.
Thank you.
For more resources, classes, and community, head over to my website, motherhoodinadhd.com.